From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tenori, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, before we roll into this conversation, I just want to give you some context. It's a crossover episode with one of my best friends, Dr. Mark Costas, who really doesn't need any introduction, has arguably the most popular dental podcast in the world. I say arguably, but I'm sure there's some data to support that is the number one podcast in the world, the Dentalpreneur podcast. Just such great content. He drops information every day. If you listen to his podcast at any level, I'm sure you've heard some of my presentations and content on his podcast. Mark runs one of the most successful coaching groups in the country, of which I'm blessed to be a black belt coach in his organization. So this conversation really just touched on a lot of different things, from developing levels of leadership and accountability within your organization to a get-together that Mark and I had celebrating my 25th wedding anniversary and everything in between. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I really did. Talking to Mark is just so easy. He's just so good at what he does. And I know that you'll find some value in this conversation. And I hope that you, if you're not already, if you're that one or two people in this world that's not already a subscriber to the Dentalpreneur podcast, I hope you check it out. With lots of love, hope to talk soon. Reach out if you need anything. Later.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What's up, my friends? I hope you are doing fantastic out there today. This is actually my first podcast back since returning from a 2-week trip to Fiji, where I did some mission work on the incredible population of savu in Fiji. We had an incredible time. We brought 5 DSI / Smile Outreach doctors with us to Fiji, and about 7 assistants / auxiliaries. I'd like to call them dental professionals for week 1, and week 2 just started yesterday. We were able to see over 340 patients. We did a ton of root canals, a ton of extractions, a lot of cleanings, a lot of kids. What we realized more than anything else is that education is lacking in a big way. A lot of the mothers still put the kids down with bottles of milk. When they're toddlers, you see a lot of the kids walking around with, 2-liter bottles of Coke. And there's just not a whole lot of education as far as oral hygiene and dietary kind of basics. So we had our hands full, but it was very, very rewarding. One of the most rewarding, probably, mission trips that I've ever been on. So I'm glad to be back, but Fiji has a huge part of my heart now. I'm really stoked today because I get to chat with a great friend of mine. He's a DSI black belt coach. He has an extremely successful regional group in upstate New York. You guys probably, if you follow any of our stuff, if you're in DSN or DSI, you've probably heard of this gentleman. It's Dr. Jason Tenori. What's up today, Jason? How you doing, my friend?
I'm living the dream, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I mean, you and I met, gosh, do you know how long ago we met? 6-7 years ago? Probably.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe, I think 2018, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And I mean, you are already a very high level operator when we met, very humble, eager to learn. But you've, almost immediately evolved into a leader within our group, somebody that people hold in very, very high esteem. Much of the group comes to you for advice and support. So I can't thank you enough for all that you do for our community. One of the things that you have kind of focused on in your multiple practice journey has been human resources, culture, systemization, but you're known kind of for being able to convey and teach some really high level leadership principles to the doctors inside DSI, but also some of the leaders and the team leads that represent some of the practices that we coach. So I want to talk to you a lot about your servant leadership course that you've recently developed, but maybe we can start with a little bit of a background as far as how you got into dental practice ownership and what your group has evolved into now.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate the opportunity. Just like most people, didn't have a super unique story. Was undergrad, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Did I want to be a doctor? Did I want to be a dentist? Did I want to be an engineer? Ended up going to Penn Dental and not even really sure if I wanted to be a dentist during my freshman year at Penn Dental. Something clicked and I started to enjoy it. Ended up starting a practice after a failed associateship, after a residency, and just really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed helping people, really enjoyed the idea of business. Got my hands on eMyth and just kind of took off from there. And then after a couple of years, began to see the potential in refining entrepreneurship skills. So started to scale a little bit, brought on some additional providers, opened up a few more locations, and then quickly came upon a ceiling of complexity in terms of leadership. So tried to be a leader to 30, 35 employees, and it just fell flat. So quickly realized that if I was going to scale this thing the way I wanted to, I needed to figure out how to grow leaders and how to empower them to be a representation of myself when I wasn't able to be in the room or in the building or in the city. And that's really what's driven me the last 10 years, is just figuring out ways to teach leadership, figuring out ways to cultivate my own leaders, empower them, grow them, so they can be the best versions of themselves and they feel like they have all the tools that they need in order to grow their teams and so on and so forth. So that's what keeps me busy nowadays, is just really trying to figure out how to grow leaders.
I love it. I love it. So tell us about your actual operation. It started off with one location. Where have you expanded to, the number of associates that you have, et cetera, so that we can kind of get context as far as the types of people that you're leading right now. The numbers, the types, and the locations and stuff is, I think, important context.
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the Rochester, Finger Lakes area of upstate New York. We have, within an hour, 7 dental practices and a fully functional dental lab. Have about 150 employees, 2 pedo-ortho offices, 5 general dentistry offices, 19 associates.
Wow.
And just a lot of hustle bustle, a lot of patience, and a lot of good things. Every now and then we get a bad thing, but for the most part, a lot of good things. I really believe in the concept of a leader truly shouldn't, a team lead, let's call it, shouldn't have more than 6 to 8 people on their team. So we try to break up our organizational chart or accountability chart for those EOS fans out there, to the point where one team lead is only responsible for 6 to 8 people. And we feel like that's the right cadence of people. So you could truly be involved in their lives. You could truly have the capacity to grow them and be honest with them and be kind to them and just be the leader that they ultimately need in order to flourish within their role.
So this is great. I'm glad we're going down this road. When you get to an operation your size, micromanagement has to go away, right? There is like a definitive departure of micromanagement or transition from micromanagement when a lot of people, when they have their first practice and they have a handful of people that they're trying to lead, a lot of people mistakenly manage their auxiliaries or their team very tightly, right? And they think that being very involved and looking over their shoulder and ensuring that everything happens a certain way is a correct way to lead. I'm just generalizing, but a lot of people start this way. I started this way. And at some point you realize as you scale that micromanagement doesn't work and people don't really respond very well to micromanagement. So you have to kind of give them a different type of leadership, a different type of guidance. And when you learn and you transition into that different type of guidance, you realize that the team flourishes with the right accountabilities and the right systems in place. That's what I've noticed as far as my leadership style and the numbers, the sheer numbers of people that you have to keep an eye on becomes a lot more manageable when you kind of change that mindset. It begs the question, like, really, what business are you in, Jason? Are you in the dental business? Are you in the people business? Are you in the recruitment business? Are you in the retention business? What business do you feel like you are in now that you have 150 people in your organization with, so many spinning plates and moving parts?
Yeah, super good question. And I've been there too, man. I've micromanaged the hell out of people and then lost people and then blamed them for we made a bad hire, or I can't believe that they didn't see the opportunity in front of them, only to then realize like I was the issue. I was the bottleneck. But business is people, right? It's all about relationships. It's all about growing people. So if I had to answer that question, I'm in the people business. I'm in the personal and professional development business.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And micromanagement is, you can't do it. Like, I'm not suggesting you can't do it. You can definitely run a business that way, but not if you're going to try to scale it and have the morale and the culture be what it's capable of being, and not where you want to make, if you maybe want to get away for a week or two and not have to be consumed with what's occurring. Tim Ferriss a long time ago, and I know you've heard this, but he said that if you really think you own a business, leave it for 12 months, and when you come back, it should be better off than when you left it. And, when we're micromanaging our people and our business, the concept of leaving for a month or 2 months is insane, right? Yeah. And it's because we're micromanaging. Whereas if we can start to delegate responsibility, if we can start to give people the autonomy to make good decisions based on the leader being crystal clear with their vision and their core values, a lot of good things can happen. And I'm really far away from where we're capable of being, but I'm definitely further along than where I was. So it works. It just takes some time, and it just takes a lot of patience, and a lot of effort.
Yeah. So I have to ask the question then, how long could you leave your business comfortably and come back and experience what Tim Ferriss is talking about, where it actually improves with your absence?
Yeah. I mean, I would say we're at the point where at least an hour, maybe two.
Good. I mean, that's double what it was last time I talked to
you. No, I bet you, and we're actually going to test this in the spring, where I'm going to be away for about 6 weeks, completely unable to connect at any level, and see what happens. And we're going to test it a couple weeks here in the fall, and then maybe a month and then 6 weeks in the late spring. So, and it's not to prove a point. It's just to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to empower the people that I depend on, and they have the authority and the autonomy to make great decisions without having to always run to me and get my input and my perspective. So, that's the goal.
I love it. I, because of this next chapter of my life, Smile Outreach International is the next chapter of my life. And I do remember like our very first phone call when you were sharing with me your vision for some of the community outreach that you wanted to accomplish in your career. And that inspired me even way back then. I was like, wow, this guy is onto something. I had kind of a kernel, a vibration, an idea, basically 5 years into my dental career that I wanted to transition someday into doing this thing for free, for people that really need it. Because I came to the realization very early in my career that, entitled societies like a lot of us live in, make it very difficult to provide good dentistry with reasonable expectations without having to look over your shoulder from a liability standpoint. And it makes dentistry really, really frustrating and stressful, right? As practitioners. And I think that it goes that way for medicine just in general. People expect perfection, don't understand why, you have to charge a fee for what we do. And, it makes dentistry a very difficult profession. I don't think it's the challenge of the clinical procedures that stress dentists out and make them, unhappy with their career choice. I really think it comes down to the unreasonable expectations with the patient base and the stresses of trying to manage a practice, things that are completely non-clinical. So early on in my career, I was like, I love clinical dentistry and the purity of doing it and like the results that you see from good clinical care. When people are reasonable is very, it fills my heart with joy. But then when, we all know about the challenges of the grind every single day. You're looking at production, you're looking at overhead, you're managing people, you're managing patients. That gets very difficult. So, when you break things down and you go back to the basics, the purity of clinical care, and you get to do that in a mission setting where people don't have access to the basics of medical or dental care, unless somebody comes and gives it to them, in their own community. There's something pure and beautiful about that. So I always kind of knew that I wanted that to be the next chapter of my career. But that leads to me being gone a lot. So I have several companies that I run on the regular, and sometimes I'm gone for 2 to 4 weeks, several times a year. And I've gotten to the point where, and this is by no fault of mine or by no good grace or talent of mine, but I've ended up with people that are running my companies that are extremely competent, that care as much as I do, that have an ownership mentality, and I can leave and the businesses run very, very well without my presence. Of course, we have to preload certain things. We have to prep when I'm gone for a month and stuff like that. But, that is, I think, the most liberating thing in the world. Not necessarily selling everything and sitting on a beach, or selling everything and trying to live off the proceeds of a windfall for the rest of your life, but actually keeping your business running and having it not be completely dependent on you. That I think is true freedom.
100% agreed. Yeah. And just using you as a lighthouse, as someone that can leave for 2 to 4 weeks at a time and still have the dental success companies run as successful as they are, just a great example for people like me. Whereas, I should be able to do that at some level. And to your point, just making sure that you, address up objections and issues before you can almost, red team certain situations before. So it'll never be perfect, but you could definitely have it be where it's way more predictable than you thought it could ever be.
I love that you use the term red term. I just spoke for, I don't know, probably 2.5 hours with Alistair yesterday because I was catching up with him. But our great mutual friend, Alistair McDonald, talked about red teaming at his closing keynote address at the summit last year. It was an awesome presentation. And, basically he gave some examples, but red teaming basically is creating scenarios to pressure test your organization. So what's the worst possible thing that can happen? And then how would we solve that potential scenario? The government uses this, and they've used it in wartime situations. All of our agencies kind of use red teaming to protect the nation from potential foes. But red teaming your actual operation and looking to see, what could possibly happen while I'm gone for 4 weeks, and kind of preventing that from happening and having the measures in place that trigger, when one of those types of situations occurs. It's a really, really liberating exercise, I think. It's
a great exercise, and we've done it. even in situations where I'm not gone, where my human resource lead's gone and payroll's due, and what do we do now? Like, so just having backups plans in place for things like that, because life does happen. And, it's, if you can be prepared for those unique situations, then you'll be that much better long term.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to transition into your favorite thing to teach, and that is leadership. Servant leadership specifically. You just got done teaching an 8-week course, and I would love to hear more about your views and the actual definition of servant leadership and how it differs from maybe some of the other kind of conventional wisdom about leadership that's been taught in the past years and through certain leadership experts and books. How does it differ, and what are the subtleties to what you're teaching as compared to what we've heard, 80s, 90s, and 2000s about leadership?
Yeah, super good question. From my perspective, I use terms like to lead with power versus to lead with influence. And to lead with power can best be summed up with do it because I said so. Mm-hmm. Do it or else. Do it or you're suspended, right? And that's to your point of how leadership was for a long time in the 80s and 90s. And then a generation of people started to enter the workforce where they were like, screw you, like I'll just go work for someone else, right? So you had to kind of adapt if you led via power. So there's a lot of different definitions for servant leadership, but in a nutshell, the way I teach it, and to kind of take a step back, I truly believe that leadership is one of the most ambiguous terms, one of the most ambiguous things to teach. There's thousands of leadership books. Mm-hmm. Each one has a different kind of take. So when I try to coach and teach servant leadership to either my own team or to doctors and team leads across the country, I really try to operationalize the material in a way that's very, very tactile, a way that's very objective. So from my perspective, leadership is basically providing people with what they need versus what they want. And the easiest way to provide people with what they need is to show them love. Now, as soon as I mention the word love, I get people like, well, I'm turning off this podcast now, or I'm going to call HR, and, they're talking about love. And I don't mean erotic love. I don't mean like jacuzzis and roses and butterflies in your stomach. I mean agape love, the behavior of love. So the behavior of love means like you may not choose to like someone, but you can choose to love them. Vince Lombardi is famous for saying, I don't necessarily have to like the players that I coach, but I will choose to love them. And then that begs the question of, okay, if you're going to love on somebody, what does that really mean? So we've broken it down into 8 specific principles of love. Everything from patience, kindness, humility, respect. You mentioned not micromanaging people. Respect in our world of servant leadership is just that. So if you really want to show someone respect, then you start to delegate authority to them. You don't micromanage them. So in each of these 8 principles of agape love, we take a deep dive into different ways to express each one. And it's my belief, and I've lived this, that if you can express each of those 8 principles of agape love, you can become the best possible leader you can be, and you can ultimately grow the people that you're trying to lead and make them 1% better every day. So, that's obviously a super abbreviated version, and we can go down a rabbit hole on any of those 8 principles. But if you're able to do those things on a day in and day out basis, I think you'll be pretty happy with the overall result.
If you are going to, a la Jocko Willink, if you were going to create a field manual, like the servant leadership field manual, like tactically, what does that mean? Like, this all sounds good. You've sold us. We're ready to go. How do we implement this mindset and this whole cultural shift in our organizations? Where do you start?
First, you need to develop the courage to change. So the classic example that I like to give is you're walking down the hallway in your office and you overhear a hygienist say something to a patient that just makes you cringe. And you know that that's not what you've taught the hygienist to say. You know that there's no benefit in what the hygienist just said to the patient. And the hygienist may have said it innocently, or may not have. Who knows? So in your mind, you say to yourself, I need to have a conversation with that hygienist at the end of the day. And I need to make sure she understands that what she said doesn't serve the patient, doesn't serve the business, and what have you. And then, you get caught up in the whirlwind of the day, and the end of the day comes and you say to yourself, I will have that conversation, but I'm going to have it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and you forget to have the conversation. You say, I'll just have it over after the weekend. I'll have it on Monday. And then next thing you know, you don't have it. So in my opinion, that's where it all starts, is having the courage to, we use the phrase, go into the storm and have these minute meetings with people. If there's an opportunity to reset expectations, if there's an opportunity to keep someone accountable to something that you observed or some type of behavior. But at the same time, it cannot only be correction. It's like when you're raising kids, and you know this all too well. If the only time your boys were to hear from you is when you were going to correct them or discipline them or tell them that they could have been better, then they start to tune you out and they develop a level of resentment. So honesty is one of the principles of servant leadership, and you need to be honest with people. And when I say honest, I mean you need to be clear about if they're doing a good job. You need to make sure that they have enough training. You need to make sure that they understand the consequences of their actions as it affects the patient, the business, and the rest of the team. But if the only time a team member is hearing from you is when you need to have an honest conversation, then it's just not going to land well. So you also need to continually exhibit these principles of patience and kindness and humility, respect, all the other ones. And to take a deep dive into something like kindness. We define kindness as to show sincere and specific appreciation for someone, to be an active, empathetic listener. That may sound really kind of kumbaya, but when you really get into the weeds on what we mean by kindness is, do you show sincere and specific appreciation for someone on a regular basis? And by that, I don't mean as you're leaving the office for the night, you just yell out down the hallway, "Great job, everyone," as you walk to your car. I mean, are you going to people specifically and saying, "Hey, I overheard that conversation you had with that upset patient. You handled it beautifully. I just wanted to commend you on how well articulated that conversation went." Like that's showing sincere and specific praise and appreciation. You could take it one step further and realize that everyone has their own level of appreciation that resonates most with them. Most people know Gary Chapman's book, 5 Love Languages. But there's also, Gary Chapman wrote a version of that for the workplace. It's called 5 Appreciation Languages at Work. And you can have your team take assessments on which language of appreciation resonates most with them. Is it words of affirmation? And if it is words of affirmation, is it in a public setting or is it a private setting? If it is words of affirmation, is it verbally or is it written? You can get really, really specific on how people want to be appreciated. Is it acts of service? Is it tangible gifts? I tell the story about one of my best assistants who just was a rock star. I would constantly give her words of affirmation, and I could tell it was landing okay, but not as I wanted it to land. And then I had her take the assessment, and it came back that words of affirmation was her least favorable love language appreciation, and it was tangible gifts. So I got her a $10 gift card for Ulta, and she started crying, right? So it was like,
crazy.
You don't know what you don't know, right? So just taking a deep dive and each one of these principles and making sure that you do the, let's call it soft stuff that I just described. And when you build up some equity exercising the soft stuff, then you almost are given permission to have a difficult conversation with someone that's based in honesty. Because I truly believe at the end of the day, people really want to know if they're winning or not. And if they leave work and they're not quite sure, that's not good. They need to have absolute clarity with, are they doing a good job? Are they meeting expectations? Are they winning? And it's your job as the leader to make sure they have answers to those questions.
And that wraps it up for part 1 of this 2-part episode featuring my great friend, Dr. Jason Tenori. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow for part 2 and the conclusion. And if you'd like to take advantage of a special discount for Jason's courses, just go to dentallighthouse.com/Mark25. 25% discount, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tenori, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.